Okay, we are up to the last YouTube. This is about Ezra and Nehemiah. So we learned in Ezra, we learned Parak Aleph of Ezra, and we learned that there was supposed to be Galut for 70 years. After those 70 years are over, this Galut Bavel, after the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, after those 70 years are over, we learned about what's called Hatzarat Koresh, is the declaration of King Cyrus, that he has this idea that he was really a messenger of God, and he was going to go ahead and allow the Jewish people to return to Eretz Israel. What he does grant them is the ability to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. He does not give them autonomy. Now, they're going to go back to Eretz Israel, but still going to be subservient to the Malchut of Koresh. Now, Koresh is Persians, Melech Paras, because again, Nebuchadnezzar, who was Melech Bavel, destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, but then there was a war between Bavel and Paras, and Paras, the Persians, subdued the Babylonians, and now the Persians have sovereignty over this part of the world, and Koresh gives the Jewish people the ability to come back and rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. He already understands that not all the Jews are going to go back, and he goes ahead and says to those Jews that are staying, they can offer the financial support. So in terms of contemporary history, let's say contemporary of the last 150 years, Hatzarat Koresh is comparable to the Balfour Declaration, where the English give the ability, declare the ability to form a Jewish state. That's essentially what Koresh does regarding the Beit HaMikdash, but not regarding sovereignty. In the meantime, once the initial Jews start to come and build the Beit HaMikdash, there is quite a bit of hitnagdut. There's quite a bit of protest from the local governors. They don't want the Jews there. They have their little fiefdoms going on over there, and the last thing they want to see are Jews coming and reestablishing themselves in Sion, back into Jerusalem. And therefore they protest the Jews coming back. Eventually, a sitna, which we could call a white paper, is issued stopping the building of the Beit HaMikdash, who was issued by somebody called Achashverosh. Is that the same Achashverosh as in Megillah? Just another Achashverosh is a matter of debate. But later on, there's a new king called Darius, Daryavash, who again rediscovers the Hatzarat Koresh, the declaration of Koresh, and he's the one who really pushes the project ahead and allows for the Binyan Beit HaMikdash to be completed. But even when the Beit HaMikdash is completed, it is done with very, very little fanfare. 3 psukim, which are dedicated to the rededication of the Beit HaMikdash. So we see that it was, it was a handful of Jews, relatively speaking. Yushalayim itself is not built up at all. There's a lot of hitnagdut. There's a lot of hitnagdut. You know what hitnagdut is? Protests by locals, and so it's less than a wonderful, wonderful event. The Navi then tells us, it's actually Tuvim, tells us about Ezra. Ezra has been above all this time. He does not come with the initial builders of the Beit HaMikdash, but he arrives later on. I believe it's 52 years after the building of the Beit HaMikdash, if I'm not mistaken. Who is Ezra? So that we have a very, very long yichus. In the beginning of Perek Zion, goes through Ben. He's a Ben of Aaron. So he's the Kohen. And Ezra becomes the spiritual leader of the Jews in Eretz Israel. We know from other prakim in Ezra and later in Nehemiah that the education of those people that came back to Eretz Israel was nil. Their observance was, except for the Kohanim, was not very strong at all. And Ezra comes, and he's the one who re-educates the Jews regarding Torah. Now he comes with the blessings again of the Persian king, and he comes with different sorts of monies to go ahead and to support the activities of the Beit HaMikdash, and he's given permission to go ahead and to teach the people to observe Torah. Even though, again, the Persians might have been against this, we want them doing the minhagim, the customs of the land. They give him permission to go ahead and do this, and even to go ahead and to have their own court system. So we see a little bit of autonomy, a self-rule, which the Jews were able to have in Eretz Yisrael. And of course, Ezra, at the end of Perek Zion, thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because he understands this is not the king of Persia, and we don't just have to give Hakarat Tov to the Persians, but ultimately, this is being orchestrated from above, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We then come to Nehemiah. Nehemiah, again, we find him at the beginning of our studies. We find Nehemiah is the butler to the king, which means he's the one that goes ahead and makes sure that no one's trying to poison the drinks of the king. And he has to be an extremely, extremely trusted individual. Nehemiah hears from Hanani, who is a associate of his, about the desperate plight of the Jews in Jerusalem, and that Jerusalem itself is, even though there is a Beit HaMikdash, the walls are crumbling, and it's just it's teetering. And immediately Nehemiah breaks down, and he realizes that he cannot stay in Golut anymore. He cannot stay in exile anymore, and he has to be part of that movement, returning to Eretz Yisrael and to Yerushalayim, to go ahead and to rebuild. And here we see immediately Nehemiah is mitpalel to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nehemiah is an interesting person. He is a political leader. He knows how to organize. He knows how to deal with the different local officials and everything else. He knows how to lead the people. Whereas Ezra is the religious figure, Nehemiah is the political figure. But before he does something, he always davens to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So in Perek Aleph, in the first Perek Nehemiah, we have a lengthy tefillah, and in it we have the elements of tefillah of Shemona Esrei, and that we start off with Shevach, praising God, understanding who we're addressing. Number 2 is Bakasha, is asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for things, and Hodza'ah, and thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So now Nehemiah sort of like has to break this to the king that he wants to go back to Eretz Yisrael, because again he has to be a trusted figure, and if all of a sudden he is going to go ahead and tell the king, well, I got to go back, whatever, my forefathers are buried, maybe this guy can't be trusted. Maybe there was called dual loyalty. So he's in trepidation of the king. And in Perek Bet, in the second parak, when he addresses the king, he constantly says, Melech, 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 Melech. He understands that he's speaking to a king. He understands that the king can potentially order him beheaded on the spot. He understands that. And therefore, Nehemiah, first of all, davens a very short tefillah before he goes ahead and addresses the king. And then once he feels that the king is okays his request, then he uses that time in order to get additional support from the king for his project in terms of monies and in terms of rites of passage from place to place, that he's coming as an emissary, as an emissary of the king. Because again, he is a political figure. He understands what's needed in order to be successful. When he arrives in Yerushalayim, one of the first things that he does is he goes ahead and surveys the walls and sees that they're crumbling, and he crumbles them more. He sort of like the Psukim described that he makes more holes in the wall. Now, this could just be very practical because he saw how weak the walls were, or perhaps the reason was because he wanted to, the people there were complacent. They were just sort of like saying, well, this is the way things are. And so he sort of like wanted to make things worse. So they should wake up and say, hey, if we don't rebuild these walls, and if we don't proclaim our hold on Yerushalayim, this is not going to last. The enemies around, when they see that he starts this process of rebuilding the walls, because that was his first his first project. So they say, "Oh, you must be planning a rebellion against the king, and therefore this whole project should be stopped."